Hello there. I'm, reac- I'm reacting to if Obi-Wan had visions of Anakin killing the Tuskens. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, and I'll put Star Wars Crew's channel in the description below, so you can check it out for yourself. As always, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, and don't forget to check out my reaction playlist for more reactions. Now let's get started.
What if Obi-Wan had visions of Anakin killing Tuskens? How would that change things? Let's find out. So in this timeline, everything will be the same as it was in the original timeline until a short while before the events of Attack of the Clones. So as mentioned by Mace Windu in the original timeline, Anakin and Obi-Wan were busy settling a border dispute in the Ancient system right before the events of Attack of the Clones. And in this new timeline, two things would be different about this. One, the Jedi Council would decide to deal with the situation on Ancient roughly a standard month earlier than in the original timeline, and Anakin would get visions of his mother dying while he's on Ancient with Obi-Wan. So let's see how that changes things. So as the mission on Ancient neared its successful conclusion, with the planet's leaders persuaded to remain within the Republic, Anakin finally found some time to get some much-needed rest. But the sleep that found Anakin didn't offer him much comfort, as during the sleep, Anakin saw something horrible. In what felt like a very vivid dream, Anakin saw his mother being tortured to death. He then woke up in shock. This dream felt extremely real to Anakin. Anakin wondered what this could be. He knew that Jedi could sometimes see into the future. Will this dream actually come to pass? Anakin wondered. And then, in an effort to maybe understand his dreams better, Anakin shared his fears with Obi-Wan. So side note, in the original timeline as well, Anakin had shared aspects of his visions with Obi-Wan, which is why Obi-Wan asked Anakin if his dreams of his mother are what's ruining his sleep in Attack of the Clones as they are keeping watch over Padme. Anyways, coming back to this story, Obi-Wan offered Anakin the same counsel he had in the original timeline. Dreams will pass in time, Anakin. Don't dwell on them, Obi-Wan said. Yet, despite his master's words of wisdom, Padawan Skywalker's unease lingered. The next morning, as the team assigned to the mission on Ancient, which included Anakin, Obi-Wan, Barriss, and Luminara and Dooley, prepared to leave Ancient with their job done, something unexpected happened to Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan, for a moment, found himself reminiscing about the past, about a mission that he and Qui-Gon had gone on to the Pithal system roughly 8 years prior. But as Obi-Wan was thinking of his old master, he suddenly became gripped by a vision so vivid, it might as well have been reality. The vision seized Obi-Wan's mind with the intensity of a rancor's grip. There was no escape. In this vision, Obi-Wan saw Anakin, overcome with grief and rage beside his deceased mother, Shmi Skywalker, her body a silent testament to the brutality she had endured. And the next moment, as Obi-Wan watched, Anakin became a whirlwind of vengeance, unleashing his fury upon a colony of Tusken raiders who were beings native to Tatooine, Anakin's home planet. Obi-Wan watched as Anakin cut down Tusken raiders one by one, not even sparing the children. And then, as quickly as it came, the vision left Obi-Wan, and in the aftermath of the startling mission, Obi-Wan Kenobi found himself wrestling with a maelstrom of emotions and thoughts. The clarity of this vision, a premonition, leaving no room for doubt. The vision was no dream. This much was clear to Obi-Wan, especially since he was awake during the ordeal. As Obi-Wan's mind tried to process the implications of this vision, he found himself reflecting on the teachings of Master Yoda regarding premonitions. Always in motion, the future is, Yoda had often said, a mantra that seemed particularly of relevance right now. And also, the realization that both he and Anakin had been granted a glimpse into the same potential future, a future that held such darkness and despair for his Padawan, weighed heavily on Obi-Wan's heart. They had both seen the same thing, Anakin's mother dead. Anakin's dreams that he had so easily dismissed were in fact visions into the future. The same future that he had now seen, Obi-Wan realized. It was a sign, Obi-Wan concluded, not just what could be, but what they had the power to change. Premonitions or visions into the future, as taught by the Jedi, were not guarantees of what would come to pass, but rather warnings of what might occur should the current path continue unchecked. It was this understanding that ultimately guided Obi-Wan's decision. They had a chance, perhaps slim but undeniably present, to alter the course of events and steer them away from the tragedy foreseen. Meanwhile, Anakin, alongside Barriss Sophie and Master Luminara and Dooley, was in the midst of preparing for their departure. The spaceport was near, and within a few hours from now, they would be back on Coruscant. That would be the case for Barriss and her Master Luminara, but for Anakin and Obi-Wan, they would be taking a different path in this timeline. Because as Anakin was speaking with Barriss, Obi-Wan walked into the scene, carrying with him an air of determination that immediately caught Anakin's attention. Master Luminara, Barriss, Obi-Wan addressed them. Anakin and I will be delayed in our return to Coruscant. There are matters regarding Anakin's training that we need to address. Hearing this, Anakin's puzzled look deepened, a mix of curiosity and apprehension crossing his features. He wondered silently what this sudden diversion meant, fearing perhaps another round of lectures from Obi-Wan. Master Luminara, for her part, nodded in understanding. The mission on Ancion had concluded, and without immediate orders from the Council, there was no reason to question Master Kenobi's judgment. Very well, Master Kenobi, may the Force be with you both, Luminara said, her tone imbued with the serene confidence characteristic of her. Barriss Sophie, Luminara's apprentice, mirrored her master's sentiment, offering a supportive smile to Anakin before she and her master made their way over to the nearest spaceport, leaving Anakin and Obi-Wan alone. And once they were alone, Obi-Wan quickly turned to Anakin. The seriousness in his gaze a clear indication that the matters at hand were of grave importance. Obi-Wan knew that sharing his own vision might not be the best course of action. It could potentially unsettle Anakin further, Obi-Wan thought. Instead, Obi-Wan chose a different path, one that would acknowledge Anakin and his own turmoil and offer a direct way to address it. Anakin, Obi-Wan said, his voice calm and reassuring, I've given thought to the dreams that have been troubling you. It's clear they're having a profound effect, distracting you from your duties and peace of mind. And I believe, given the circumstances, we should rectify these problems by making a quick visit to Tatooine. That might help you, Obi-Wan finished. Anakin's reaction was one of utter surprise. His master was suggesting something quite unorthodox, something the Jedi Council might not approve of. But Master, the Council, they would likely not see the wisdom in this. Anakin voiced his concerns, all the while wanting Obi-Wan to completely ignore these concerns. Obi-Wan then looked at his Padawan, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his lips, reminiscent of the maverick spirit of his own late master, Qui-Gon Jinn. The Council doesn't need to be involved in every decision we make, Anakin. Consider this as part of your training. A lesson in following the Force, even when it leads.
I'll be back. I'm back. Let's continue.
Us down unexpected paths. It was an appealing perspective, one that offered a semblance of hope and action against the helplessness his dreams had instilled in him. And so, after a moment of contemplation, Anakin nodded, his resolve solidifying. Alright, Master, let's go to Tatooine, Anakin said. And with their decision made, the two Jedi quickly gathered their belongings and made their way to the nearest spaceport. But not immediately, as they didn't want to run into Barriss and Luminara this quick after their farewell. Later, as the transport shuttle they were on cut through the vastness of space towards Tatooine, both Anakin and Obi-Wan were lost in their thought, the silence between them heavy with anticipation and concern. Anakin found his mind wandering through a tumult of memories associated with Tatooine. The pod races he participated in, the friendships he forged, and above all else, the stark, unyielding life of a slave. But, despite the bitter memories, his thoughts invariably drifted towards his mother, Shmi. The prospect of seeing her again, of ensuring her safety, brought more than a flicker of hope to his troubled heart. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan, on the other hand, grappled with a mixture of worry and determination. The vision he'd experienced was not something he could easily dismiss. Even though Obi-Wan had tried to convince himself that their presence on Tatooine could alter the course of the grim future, a part of him wondered if the events he foresaw were still destined to unfold. We have the power to change things, she silently reassured himself, clinging to the belief that the Force had guided them on this path for a reason. And as the shuttle began its descent to the surface, the familiar dunes of Tatooine came into view. Anakin looked out the window, a complex array of emotions washing over him as he beheld the endless expanse of sand. It was a stark reminder of his past, of the hardships and the resilience it had instilled in him. Stepping up the shuttle, Anakin's boots made contact with the warm sand, stirring memories of his childhood. He couldn't help but recall how Watto would berate him for not cleaning the sand off of his second-hand droids. And then, turning to Obi-Wan, Anakin said the following. We should start at Watto's old shop. If anyone knows where my mother might be, it'll be him. And hearing this, Obi-Wan nodded in agreement, recognizing the importance of letting Anakin take the lead on this part of their journey. And that is because when 10 years prior, when Obi-Wan and his company were forced to land on Tatooine, Obi-Wan did not really get out of the ship much. It was his master Qui-Gon that went out and found Anakin. And because of that, Obi-Wan followed Anakin, trusting in his Padawan's intimate knowledge of the landscape and his people. And so Anakin led them through the streets of Mos Espa, his familiarity with the streets guiding him swiftly towards their destination. As they approached Watto's shop, the sight of the ramshackle building with its assortment of droid parts and mechanical detritus brought a rush of memories to Anakin. He paused for a moment, taking in the scene, before stepping forward with renewed determination, and with Obi-Wan following him. A bell above the door jingled as they entered, announcing their arrival. The interior of the shop was much as Anakin remembered it, cluttered, dusty, and filled with the potential of unfulfilled dreams.
Yeah.
Watto, the Toydarian gem dealer, looked up from his workbench, his wings fluttering in surprise at the sight of 2 Jedi walking into his humble shop. And as Anakin and Obi-Wan walked in further into the confines of Watto's shop, the air was thick with dust and echoes of the past. Anakin then stepped forward towards a glaring Watto. "We're looking for Shmi Skywalker. Do you know where she is?" Anakin asked Watto in fluent Huttese. Watto's initial reaction was to eye them with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. Information ain't free, Jedi or not," he stated, his tone gruff. However, a moment later, as his gaze settled more intently on Anakin, a spark of recognition flickered in Watto's eyes. "Annie? Little Annie?" he exclaimed, switching over to basic, his demeanor shifting from wary to astonished. "Yes, it's me, Watto. Please, I need to know where my mother is," Anakin implored, the patience in his voice thinly veiled over his growing impatience. Seeing the young man who had once been his slave, now standing before him as a Jedi, stirred something in Watto, but quickly realizing that Anakin was in no mood to catch up on old times, Watto brought his focus back to Shmi Skywalker, Anakin's mother. "Ah, yes, Shmi. Annie, I sold her," Watto began, but quickly added that the man who bought her, freed her, and married her. Where is she now?" Anakin asked in response. Let me grab my register," Watto said, following which he floated over to a dusty old register on the counter, flipping through the pages with his stubby fingers. "Let's see, Shmi, yes. She was sold to a man named Cliegg Lars, that's who. He freed her, then married her. They lived past the Dune Sea. The Lars homestead, that's where you'll find them," Watto finally announced, squinting at the faded writing in the register. And following this, after squinting his eyes some more, Watto went on to give Anakin a more detailed info on where exactly the Lars homestead was. And Anakin absorbed the information, his mind racing with thoughts and emotions. He nodded to Watto, a gesture of gratitude, before simply turning to leave with Obi-Wan. And as they exited, Watto watched them go, a complex expression on his face. Despite everything, it was evident he felt a certain pride in seeing Anakin, once a boy under his charge, now a powerful figure, seeking to do good. With the necessary information in hand, Anakin and Obi-Wan stepped out into the scorching Tatooine suns, squinting against the harsh light. The two then found their way to a nearby taxi stand, where a curious vehicle awaited, its design a blend of functionality and the whimsical aesthetic typical of the Outer Rim. The taxi was a repulsor-lift craft, its body withered by sand and time, with open sides and a canopy to shield passengers from the relentless twin suns of Tatooine. Anakin and Obi-Wan then climbed aboard one such taxi, and then told the droid driving it where they needed to go. And then, with a sputter and a hum, the taxi lifted off, gliding smoothly over the sandy terrain. The vehicle navigated with ease, its repulsor lift engine humming a soft tune that seemed almost in harmony with the whispering winds of the desert. Anakin's sight was fixed on the horizon, while Obi-Wan surveyed their surroundings with the keen awareness of a Jedi. Upon arriving at the Lars homestead, Obi-Wan and Anakin were greeted by the sight of moisture evaporators standing like silent sentinels amidst the fields. The sight was a stark contrast to the rest of Tatooine, an oasis of life in a land that offered very little apart from the sand that got everywhere. As they disembarked the taxi, which settled into the sand with a gentle hiss, they were met by a young couple who eyed them with a mix of curiosity and caution. And as for who this couple was, it was Owen Lars and his girlfriend, Beru Whitesun, who were going about their daily chores when they noticed the two strangers. Obi-Wan stepped forward, his demeanor calm. "Good day, I am Obi-Wan Kenobi, and this is Anakin Skywalker. We're here to see Cliegg Lars and Shmi Skywalker," he stated, his tone respectful. Owen and Lars had an immediate change in demeanor the instant the name Skywalker left Obi-Wan's lips. It was as if the pieces of a family tale, often recounted but scarcely believed, suddenly clicked into place. Owen's eyes, which held the sharpness of the desert, softened as he looked at Anakin. "Yes, she's here," Owen uttered, a note of incredulity in his voice. Anakin's heart, which had been a tempest of emotion, surged with an indescribable mixture of relief and anxious anticipation. The young Jedi barely noticed Owen leading him and his master through the homestead. Anakin's mind was in a whirl, his feet moving almost of their own accord. Owen's pace then quickened as he moved through the simple, whitewashed corridors of the homestead. Owen's voice, carrying a sudden urgency, called ahead into the heart of the home. Anakin and Obi-Wan exchanged a glance. A wordless conversation passing between master and apprentice. They both knew the importance of what was about to happen. A voice then replied to Owen from the room ahead. A voice frayed with time, yet warm and unmistakably familiar. Anakin's breath hissed. His entire being seemed to lean towards that sound. Then came the footsteps, quickening as they approached, heralding a reunion a decade in the making. The figure that emerged was one of strength and grace, as with the marks of a life not easily lived. Shmi Skywalker stopped abruptly, her hand flying to her mouth as her eyes fell upon the grown visage of the boy she once cradled. "Annie, is that you?" she whispered, her voice a melody long forgotten, now remembered by Anakin. Anakin stood there, a Jedi in stature, but in this moment he was simply a son. His emotions, always a storm beneath the surface, now broke free. "Yes, Mom, it's me," he managed to say, his voice breaking with the weight of the words. It was a simple exchange, but within it lay wells of pain endured and solace finally found. The reunion between Anakin and Shmi was a tapestry of shared stories, lost time being woven back together with words of the past, present, and hints of the future. Shmi spoke of her life, of Klieg and the homestead, of Owen growing into a man with a good heart, and of such a lovely person Beru was. Anakin, with his mother's hand clasped in his own, felt a peace he hadn't known in a long time. And Obi-Wan, observing the newfound joy in Anakin's demeanor, couldn't help but share in the joy. Yet, amidst this familial warmth, his thoughts briefly wandered, pondering his own origins. A Jedi wasn't meant to dwell on personal attachments or yearnings for familial bonds, he reminded himself sternly. With a silent shake of his head, Obi-Wan banished these reflections, refocusing on the present. As the twin suns of Tatooine dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with fiery oranges and purples, Anakin and Obi-Wan found a moment away from the Lars' bustling household. Outside the homestead, under a canopy of emerging stars, the two Jedi, master and apprentice, stood, reflecting on the day's events. Anakin's face was alight with a serene joy, his usual restlessness replaced by a quiet contentment. Obi-Wan's expression, however, was one of gentle admonishment, as he lightly said, "Don't get too accustomed here, Anakin. We'll need to get back to Coruscant soon." And before Anakin could respond to that, Klieg Lars approached the two, his eyes holding the resilience of a man well acquainted with the harshness of this world. Joining the Jedi, he eventually shared his concerns about the recent boldness of the Tusken Raiders. "They're getting too daring," he said, a far-off worry creasing his brow. "Too courageous." Obi-Wan felt a stir of concern at the mention of the Tuskens. Despite Shmi's safety, the specter of his vision loomed at the back of his mind, yet he quickly reassured himself. Shmi was safe here, surrounded by her family, far from the dangers he had foreseen. The night grew colder, a reminder of Tatooine's unforgiving nature. And then Klieg Lars led Obi-Wan and Anakin back into the homestead. And as they retreated inside, Obi-Wan felt the subtle shift in the Force, a sense of something unresolved lingering in the air. The first light of dawn cast a soft glow over the Lars homestead as Tatooine's twin sons began their ascent. Anakin woke up feeling well-rested, with no terrible dreams having troubled his sleep. He then stepped outside, and there he saw Owen Lars, the son of Klieg Lars and his stepbrother, silhouetted against the brightening horizon, his gaze lost in the vastness of the desert. Approaching quietly, Anakin joined Owen, following his line of sight into the distance. "Everything all right, Owen?" Anakin asked, his voice breaking the morning stillness. Owen nodded, though the set of his jaw spoke of unvoiced concerns. "Shmi, she went out early to gather mushrooms near the evaporators. It's a chore she's taken to since..." His words trailed off, but the implication hung in the air. Anakin felt a twinge of unease. The Force seemed to hum with a faint warning, a whisper that nudged at his instincts. She'd been gone longer than usual? Anakin asked, his concerns growing. Yes, but it's probably nothing. She loves the quiet of the dawn, Owen replied, trying to reassure both Anakin and himself. Yet, the Force murmuring grew louder in Anakin's mind, a sense of urgency that couldn't be ignored. We should check on her, just to be certain, Anakin suggested, his voice firm with the decision. Owen looked at Anakin and nodded in agreement. Without another word, they moved towards the speeder parked nearby. The speeder cut through the morning air, skimming towards the dunes, towards the field of moisture evaporators. As they drew near, Anakin's apprehension mounted. He scanned the landscape, his senses extended, reaching out with the Force. And there, amidst the row of evaporators, they found signs of a struggle. The ground was disturbed, tracks leading away into the desert. Tusken Raiders' tracks. And along with that, the tracks of banthas they use to traverse the desert. Anakin's heart lurched. Images from his vision mingled with the reality before him. A premonition turned palpable. Mom, Anakin called out, his voice echoing across his hands. There was no response, only the harsh cry of a distant desert bird. Owen's face had gone pale, his eyes tracking the trail of the footprints. The Tuskens, he muttered, dread in his tone. Anakin's resolve hardened, the Force coursing through him with a newfound intensity. They will find her, Owen. With a nod to Owen, Anakin led the way, the speeder carrying them swiftly across the dunes in pursuit of the Raiders and Shmi Skywalker. The sand seemed to stretch endlessly, but Anakin's determination did not waver. The Force was with him, guiding him, his mother's safety, the singular focus that drove him onward. Meanwhile, Owen, sitting beside Anakin, alerted Klieg and Obi-Wan of what had happened and where they are headed. The tracks that the Tuskens left behind were clear, almost as if they wanted to be followed. Upon hearing the alarm in Owen's voice, Klieg Lars's features contorted with anger and fear. He began to marshal his thoughts into action, preparing to rally a rescue party, just as he did in the original timeline. And Beru, although shaken, understood the gravity of the situation and quickly moved to alert their neighbors. And Obi-Wan, sensing the undercurrents of alarm, knew well that time was their most precious commodity here. With the Force as his guide, he was ready to leap into action without delay. Klieg, he began, his voice steady. Let me and Anakin handle this. We've dealt with similar situations in the past. We can... Klieg interjected, driven by her husband's fervent resolve. He would not be swayed to wait idly. As he held his blaster rifle, the weight of it cold and familiar in his hands, Klieg said the following. No, I'm coming with you. She's my wife, he stated, a steely determination lighting his voice. And Obi-Wan, seeing that there was no point in arguing, nodded, and together they made their way over to a land speeder. And as for Beru, witnessing the exchange between Obi-Wan and Klieg, she knew the stakes. With a steadiness belying her inner turmoil, she nodded to Klieg. I'll alert the others. We will get her back. Her voice was firm. Klieg gave her a quick, appreciative glance. A silent promise of return etched in his eyes. Tell them to come after us, Beru. These animals will not live to see tomorrow, Klieg said, before he sped away with Obi-Wan. A little later, as Anakin and Owen were pursuing the trail left by the Sand People, a dusty mirage in the distance began to solidify into the shapes of banthas and their Tusken riders. And upon seeing this, Anakin, fueled by a mix of fear and anger, pushed the land speeder to its limits, while Owen, beside Anakin, prepared his own rifle, ready to take on the Tuskens. Behind them, Obi-Wan and Klieg quickly caught up, their speeder's engine roaring in tandem with the first. Klieg's eyes were narrowed, his lips curled around curses aimed at the Tuskens, the rifle in his hand a testament of his readiness for battle. Suddenly, Obi-Wan's senses, heightened by the Force, detected an imminent danger. A thin, sharp, almost invisible line stretched across their path, almost at neck height of a human riding a speeder. A Tusken trap. With no time to stop, Obi-Wan's shout cut through the howl of the winds. Duck, he said. At his command, all four men lowered their heads, just in time, the wire whistling harmlessly overhead, snatching only a few strands of hair from Klieg's head in his wake. More could be ahead, Obi-Wan warned, his eyes scanning the terrain while his mind reached out, feeling the tendrils of danger the Tuskens had laid. So side note, in the original timeline, this wire is how the 30 men and Klieg who went after Shmi got defeated by the Tuskens. They didn't see the line, and they all drove their speeders into it at full speed, most of them dying immediately. And this was also how Klieg lost his leg in the original timeline. But in this timeline, Obi-Wan's Jedi reflexes saved them. Anyways, coming back to the story, navigating the speeders through an obstacle course of deadly traps, Anakin and Obi-Wan, with their heightened reflexes, maneuvered with a precision that only a Jedi could muster. Their companions safe behind their vigilant gaze. And soon enough, clear of the traps, the chase continued, until the silhouette of the Tuskens grew larger. And as they grew near, the Tuskens, seeing the two speeders, readied their own cyclo rifles. Anakin and Obi-Wan, understanding the threat, relinquished the controls of the speeder to Klieg and Owen. And then, with deft movements, they ignited their lightsabers, the blades casting a glow against the morning light. The speeder's engine hummed with a tense rhythm as they closed in on the Tuskens. As they approached, the Tatooine twin suns cast long shadows over the desert, turning each Tusken and Bantha into elongated specters of the confrontation to come. Cyclo rifles, primitive yet lethal, crackled in the dry air, their projectiles hurling towards the Jedi and their companions. Unlike blaster bolts, these could not be redirected back to their shooters, but were instead met with these swift, interceptive movements of lightsabers, creating a dance of sparks and near misses. And then, as the distance flows further, Anakin and Obi-Wan, propelled by urgency and by the Force, leapt from their speeders onto the Banthas, a move as bold as it was necessary. The Tuskens, unaccustomed to such direct and agile adversaries, found themselves at a disadvantage. The Jedi's lightsabers moved with precision and intent, parrying and striking in equal measure. Meanwhile, Klieg and Owen were far from mere spectators. With the Tuskens not able to flee, the two men stopped their speeders and grabbed their rifles, each taking aim and firing with precision born of practice and desperation. And the Tuskens, caught between the relentless advance of lightsabers and blaster fire, found their numbers quickly diminishing. Amidst the chaos, Anakin's focus narrowed to a singular point, the cries of his mother. With every Tusken he cut through, Anakin got closer to Shmi, fueled by a power he had seldom felt so intensely. When he finally found Shmi, tied and distressed, but alive, his relief was overshadowed by a fierce protectiveness. With a surge of determination, he freed her from her bonds, his lightsaber a blur of deadly efficiency, as he ensured their attackers would not harm her or anyone else ever again. And the Tuskens, now realizing the futility of their resistance against such overwhelming force, attempted to flee. But Owen and Klieg were not about to let that happen. Embodying both rage and relief, they took down each and every Tusken they saw. And so the few Tuskens who managed to evade Anakin's wrath fell to their precise shots. And as for Obi-Wan, witnessing the turn of events, felt a deep concern for Anakin's rage-fueled efficiency. But he did feel a sense of relief as Anakin's mother was now safe and the Tuskens had been dealt with. The vision had been changed, Obi-Wan told himself. As the last of the Tuskens fell or fled, the farmers arrived, led by Beru, wielding a rifle of her own. The aftermath was a grim tableau of justice and survival, a testament to the lengths to which those threatened by the Tuskens would go to protect their own. The air, once filled with the sounds of battle, now held a heavy silence, broken only by the soft, relief-filled exchanges among the homestead's defenders. As for Shmi, though shaken, she was alive. The relief that washed over Anakin was palpable, and Shmi's subsequent care in a Mos Espa hospital was a time of reflection and gratitude, with Klieg and Owen expressing their deep thanks to Obi-Wan, while Anakin sat beside his mother, who by this point was asleep. In the sterile quiet of the hospital room, Anakin sat in deep contemplation beside his sleeping mother. The peace of the moment was a stark contrast to the tumult of emotions raging within him. And it was at this point, breaking Anakin's train of thought, that Beru Whiteson walked in to check on Shmi. The conversation of Anakin and Beru initially revolved around Shmi's recovery, a topic that brought a mutual sense of relief and gratitude. However, as the dialogue progressed, the subject turned towards the darker aspects of their lives on Tatooine, mainly the Tuskens. Beru shared her concerns about the increasing boldness of their attacks, a sentiment that resonated with Anakin's own fears and anger. When Anakin remarked that the Tuskens were mere animals, Beru's response was pointed and filled with an unease that struck a chord in Anakin. She suggested that cornered animals are dangerous, and that the group they had encountered might have been part of a larger band wandering through the vast, unforgiving desert, perhaps even plotting revenge. This was evidenced, of course, by the trap the Tuskens had laid, those razor wires, evidencing that they are capable of planning and plotting. This notion unsettled Anakin profoundly. The idea that other Tuskens out there could pose a threat to his newly reunited family sparked a determination within him to take action. Beru's hope that their recent actions might at least deter further attacks for a while provided little to comfort Anakin. And then, Beru's departure to fetch some warm water for Shmi when she woke up left Anakin again alone with his thoughts, the weight of responsibility bearing down on him. Convinced that the Tuskens represented a danger that could not be ignored, Anakin resolved to deal with them himself. He understood that Obi-Wan might not see the wisdom in this course of action, Obi-Wan might suggest patience and restraint, but Anakin felt a pressing need to ensure the safety of his mother and her family. And so, with a look of fierce determination etched across his features, Anakin got up and silently made his way out of the hospital, commandeering one of the large speeder bikes parked outside. Anakin figured that if these Tuskens were indeed part of a larger group, or tribe, then following the general direction in which the Tuskens that caught Shmi were traveling in would take him, Anakin, closer to their camp. This was Anakin's general idea on how he was about to do this, and on top of that, he also had the aid of the Force. And the presence of living beings was something Force users could sense, especially amidst vast expanse of places where no one lived, like a desert. And so with all this in his mind, Anakin set off into the desert. He would not allow these animals to threaten his family or anyone else again. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan Kenobi, standing outside the hospital, was in deep reflection over the events that had transpired. He believed that they had altered the grim future that both he and his apprentice had seen. And that was true. Shmi Skywalker was now safe, and Anakin had no reason to give in to his rage, Obi-Wan thought. However, Obi-Wan did recall how earlier in the day, when Anakin was fighting off the Tuskens that came for Shmi, he had felt Padawan Skywalker give in to a lot of his emotions. But Obi-Wan told himself that what Anakin did right there was out of a willingness to protect his mother, not to let out his rage. And this further fueled Obi-Wan's belief that his visions had been altered. Nothing Anakin did today was out of pure rage, Obi-Wan convinced himself. And then Obi-Wan began to wonder if Anakin would even be willing to return to Coruscant because of everything that happened. Yet, Obi-Wan remained confident in Anakin's commitment to the Jedi path, reassured by the belief that Shmi herself would want her son to continue his training. This was, of course, the path she herself had sent him on, along with Qui-Gon, roughly a decade ago. And then, heading back into the hospital to check on Shmi and Anakin, Obi-Wan was instead met with the sight of Beru, who seemed momentarily confused by Obi-Wan's query about Anakin's whereabouts. "He was just here," she said, her voice tinged with concern as she held a flask of water intended for Shmi upon awakening. With Anakin not responding to his calm link either, Obi-Wan's concern deepened. Where is he wondered, a sense of unease beginning to cloud his thoughts. Meanwhile, Anakin was making his journey into the heart of the desert, following the path that the Tuskens from earlier were heading towards, his mind replaying the horrors that the Tuskens could inflict. So, unlike in the original timeline where Anakin's search for Shmi and the Tuskens that got her took about a day, here it would take much less. The reason being that in the original timeline, by the time Anakin had arrived on Tatooine, it had already been 30 days since Shmi was taken, so the main Tusken camp had time to move further out into the desert, which they don't have here. The main camp of the Tusken tribe, whose members had tried to take Shmi, was close by, and not long into a search, with the aid of the Force, Anakin was upon them. And upon locating the Tusken camp, Anakin's anger reached a boiling point. The sight of the Tuskens, their banthas, their children, their entire camp sparked an intense fury within him. Animals, he seethed, his disdain for them encompassing every being and object in his view. As Anakin got off the speeder bike and advanced towards the camp, he did not bother with stealth, and as a result, his presence was quickly noted by two domesticated Tusken Mastiffs, which ended up becoming the first to fall victim to Anakin's blue saber. And the alarm raised by the demise of the Mastiffs quickly drew the rest of the Tuskens out. And armed with their gaffy sticks and rifles, they charged towards Anakin, and Anakin stood there, ready to face whatever came his way. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan's pursuit of Anakin was marked by urgency and concern. Realizing Anakin had taken a large speeder, and with Obi-Wan's help, he discovered that the speeders are equipped with trackers, a detail Anakin had overlooked in his haste, Obi-Wan figured. And as Obi-Wan spread through the desert, his mind was a whirlwind of questions and doubts. Where has Anakin gone? Was his visions becoming true? No, Shmi was safe, or had he seen multiple possible futures? Obi-Wan thought. But, breaking Obi-Wan's train of thought, he noticed something strange about Anakin's location, the tracker on Anakin's speeder to be precise. It seemed as if it was moving. In fact, it was getting closer to Obi-Wan, and soon enough, the sounds of an approaching speeder reached Obi-Wan's ears, and then the sound grew louder, and soon enough, Anakin appeared in the distance, and upon seeing Obi-Wan, Anakin stopped his speeder, his expression one of surprise upon seeing Obi-Wan waiting for him in the middle of the desert in the night. Obi-Wan's gaze was one of deep concern mixed with a hint of reprimand. Anakin, on the other hand, appeared conflicted, his earlier resolve now tempered by the reality of his actions and the presence of his mentor. Under the vast expanse of Tatooine's night sky, the two figures of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Padawan Skywalker stood amidst the endless dunes. Stars above them were bright, casting a serene glow over the harsh landscape.
Kenobi.
A stark contrast to the turmoil unfolding between master and apprentice. "Where have you been, Anakin?" Obi-Wan's voice broke the silence, a mix of worry and sternness coloring his tone. Anakin hesitated to answer at first, but eventually he spoke. "I had to ensure the Tuskens were truly gone, Master, that they wouldn't come back to harm anyone once we were gone. I found their camp, and I scared them off. Two attacked, and I defended myself," Anakin explained. Anakin went on to claim that he had merely cut off the hands of two Tuskens that attacked him, suggesting that the Tuskens, following his actions, had fled in fear. Anakin's voice was firm. Obi-Wan, sensing the depth of Anakin's conviction, attempted to peer deeper into his Padawan's mind. However, what he found was not the rage or darkness he had feared, but a fierce desire to protect, clouded by the complexities of Anakin's emotions. Whatever Anakin did was not born out of fury, but just as he had sensed earlier in the day, Anakin's actions were guided by his desire to protect, a desire that every Jedi should have, Obi-Wan thought. But as for whether Anakin's desire to protect had overshadowed the restraint that any Jedi should always possess, troubled Obi-Wan's mind. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken words and thoughts. They stood in the middle of a vast open plain, the enormity of the desert around them echoing the magnitude of the moment. "We should stay out here in the dark," Anakin finally said, a subtle shift in his demeanor suggesting a readiness to leave the desert and his secrets behind. And Obi-Wan nodded, agreeing that it was time to return. "We will discuss this further, Anakin," Obi-Wan said, his voice carrying an undercurrent of unresolved tension. The idea of forcing Anakin to take him to the Tusken camp crossed Obi-Wan's mind, a part of him needing to see for himself what had transpired. Yet, Obi-Wan didn't do that, because ultimately he didn't want to. Anakin was not lying to him. Whatever he did that with the intent to protect, as a Jedi should, not to let out his anger, Obi-Wan told himself. But Obi-Wan did have a difficult time convincing himself of his own words. The next morning, as the sun rose over the Lars homestead, painting the sky with hues of gold and orange, the desert seemed to hold its breath in anticipation of the day's farewells. Shmi Skywalker, having regained her strength and spirit thanks to the care at Mos Espa's hospital and the joy of being reunited with Anakin, was ready to return to the life she had built with the Lars family. Inside the Lars household, a quiet yet profound conversation unfolded between Anakin and Shmi. Anakin, moved by the events of the past days and the reunion with his mother, expressed a lingering thought that had taken root in his mind, the idea of staying on Tatooine and leaving the Jedi Order behind. It was a moment of vulnerability, revealing the depth of his attachment and the conflict within him. Shmi, listening intently, touched Anakin's hand gently. "Annie," she began, her voice firm yet full of love. "You are meant for more than this. Your destiny lies among the stars, not bound to the sands of Tatooine." She then reminded Anakin of the dreams he once shared with her. Dreams of traveling the galaxy and going to every single star system, of making a difference. "You must follow your path, my son. I will be here, always with you, no matter where you are." And Anakin, moved by the words of his mother, felt the weight of his decision lighten. Deep down, Anakin knew his heart yearned for the stars, for the path of the Jedi, though he didn't want to admit it. His mother would be safe here, and once he attained the rank of Jedi Knight, he could visit her whenever he wished. This compromise between duty and love settled in his heart as the day wore on. And so, later that day, as Anakin and Obi-Wan prepared to leave, the air was filled with the sense of an ending and a beginning. Their unexpected detour from Halcyon had stretched longer than either had anticipated. "Any longer and the Council might start asking questions, Anakin," Obi-Wan remarked, a gentle nod to remind Anakin of the responsibilities waiting for them. Their farewells to the Lars family were a mix of gratitude and promise. Klieg, Owen, and Beru stood with Shmi, their faces a mosaic of emotions, relief, pride, and a bit of sorrow at the parting. "Take care of him," Shmi told Obi-Wan, a mother's plea enveloped in trust. Obi-Wan nodded with a smile on his face, the gravity of the promise not lost on him. "He's in good hands,"
Nice.
Obi-Wan assured Shmi. And then, the Jedi and his apprentice left the Lars homestead. As the two made their way back to the Mos Espa spaceport, the journey back to Coruscant loomed ahead. Obi-Wan remained contemplative, his mind occasionally drifting to the Tuskens and the actions Anakin might have taken against them. But it was Anakin's words of gratitude that finally broke the cycle of thoughts in Obi-Wan. "I'm glad you're my master, Obi-Wan," Anakin said, sincerity coloring his words. "Had it not been for you, my mother would have I don't even want to imagine. Thank you, Master, Anakin said. Hearing this, all of Obi-Wan's thoughts about what Anakin did to the Tuskens faded away, replaced by a reassurance that his decision to come to Tatooine had been the right one. His Padawan trusted him even more now, and perhaps, in a way, this was a trial they had both passed. Everything that happened here was the will of the Force. Obi-Wan finally chose to believe, finding solace in the idea that their actions were guided by a greater purpose. And as for the Tuskens, Obi-Wan finally told himself that the desert held many secrets, and perhaps some were best left undiscovered. As Anakin and Obi-Wan boarded the shuttle bound for Coruscant, they carried with them not just the memories of Tatooine, but the lessons learned, the bond strengthened, and a renewed sense of purpose. The stars awaited them, and the path of destiny was ever unfolding, guided by the unseen hand of the Force. And at this point, in case you're wondering how the rest of the events of Attack of the Clones would unfold, well, all of this would have happened roughly a month prior to the attempt on Padme's life, and just like in the original timeline, when that happened, Obi-Wan and Anakin would be assigned to investigate the case, because by that point, they would both be on Coruscant. And as mentioned in the book, The Approaching Storm, Jedi are given a period of rest once they completed any mission, so by the time Padme arrives on Coruscant and her ship blows up, Anakin and Obi-Wan wouldn't have been assigned any other engagements, and because of that, like in the original timeline, they would end up investigating the attempt on Padme's life, and everything else would proceed just as it did in the original timeline until Anakin and Padme goes to Naboo. In this timeline, Anakin would have no reason to get visions of his mother. In fact, he would be in a much better mental state than he was in the original timeline. And what would ultimately happen because of that? Well, what do you think? If I went on about that as well, this video would be 2 hours long. Maybe I'll cover that in a future video. But before you leave, do check out The Approaching Storm if you want to know more about the mission on Anxion. Anyways, that's it. If you have the time and if you feel like helping out the channel, do check out my Patreon. Link should be in the description, where for $1 or more a month, you can get early access to videos and some exclusive content which I keep wanting to post there. Anyways, goodbye, stay hydrated, and have an awesome rest of the day.
You say you'll never join the Navy. Never.
Nothing of that, and yeah. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And check out my reaction playlist to see more of my reactions. And again, I'll have the channel in the description below, so you can check out the original video. Again, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And let's go for 2K subscribers before the end of the year. I know we can do it. Anyway, bye for now. I'll see you guys next time. See ya.